So, 1992, graduated from Oklahoma State. Spent a little time out on the farm and ranch working animals. And decided, well, this tough life. So he goes to the Army as a veterinarian. Spent 20 years. In fact, it's the Army that sent him to Armed Forces Institute of Pathology, where he has a degree both in pathology and he's got his veterinary degree. He is Dr. Scot Estep. I got to tell you, as a vet in the military, you don't just take care of animals. In fact, the vet is the guy that gets called on to do all the jobs nobody else wants to do. It might involve soldiers. It might involve sheep. Like he might tell us a story about some sheep in Afghanistan. I don't know. I hope he does. But one thing that he got very involved in was taking care of soldiers. In fact, he he was part of a team, if not the lead, that invented and put together a couple of serious programs that saved a lot of lives. One of them was the Combat Action Tourniquet, and the other was the HEMCOM bandage. Every soldier today in our U.S. military has this tourniquet and that bandage, and it has literally saved lives, and he's one of the main ones responsible for that. So your veterinarian does more than just take care of the pet dog and cat next door, or the horses or the dogs that go along with the military. Well, he finished up at Fort Sam Houston, retired out of there, came to this area, has fallen in love with South Texas. He lives in Spring Branch. I could go through all the accolades of the programs he's involved with, from kids sports to ministry to things still with animals. And he's done some lecturing with A&M, some other schools. Scott and I play golf together. There's a number of our buddies from River Crossing here. Scott's not a bad golfer, but he's an even better Frisbee golfer. Scot Estep is nationally ranked, and he's a world-class Frisbee golfer. Now, if you've never seen Frisbee golf, it is a whole sport. In fact, if you really want to see it, go to his backyard. He's got an 18-hole setup in his backyard where he practices, because he is nationally ranked. Please help me welcome to the round-up stage, Dr. Scot Estep. Scott?
All right, thank you, Tex. I'm going to start with a trigger warning. Not all of my pictures are 100% not dead stuff, and so I just want to warn you a little bit. If you have a real problem, don't watch the screen, because it's not like I have anything really that gory, but I do have a couple of pictures that you might are a little troubled by. But I have had a very fortunate life, and so my purpose here tonight is to talk to you a little bit about the things that I've done, but also the things of how the Lord has kind of used me at each of these different jobs that I've had, in the way that wasn't exactly the plan I had, but it's the plan the Lord had, and it's been really a great time. And so I'm going to start with my first slide there. Talks about you are going to spend your life serving people. And I was at Falls Creek. If any of you have ever been to Oklahoma, there's a church camp in southern Oklahoma. It's called Falls Creek. It's a great little church camp. I was there as a youth minister working with kids. And I swear to you, the Lord said to me, you were going to spend your life serving people. At that time, I was working towards getting accepted into vet school, and that was kind of my plan. And so I'm like, okay, the Lord said I'm going to serve people. So that means that I'm going to be a foreign missionary. That means that I'm going to do this. And so I had my whole own interpretation for all of that I thought, this is what the Lord's going to do with me, because that's what he said, But what the Lord said is, you're going to spend your life serving people. And so that's what I was going to do. And I kind of started, driving towards that path. And man, those slides are a little too far away for me. So, an axiom. An axiom is kind of a statement that is kind of understood to be true, right? So it's just like, If it's cloudy, it might rain. That's kind of an axiom. There's things that you don't have to have like proof to show that they're statements. So most of this is because you're not really supposed to quote yourself. And so instead of quoting yourself, you make up these axioms and you call it an axiom, and then you can quote yourself without really quoting yourself. So, one of my axioms, the Estep's axiom number 1 is everything dies of cardiovascular collapse. So what I did, as Tex said, after veterinary school, I spent a year as a cow doctor in western Kansas. Then I spent 5 years running veterinary clinics at Army bases, and then I was trained to be a veterinary pathologist. Spent 4 years doing chemical defense research, then spent my last 8 years doing mostly trauma research. We have here in the building Brian Smith. He actually is just retiring from my biggest job that I had in the military, also doing that trauma research. So, but the everything dies of cardiovascular collapse is kind of Estep's axiom number 1, because honestly, you could blow something up with a grenade and you could say, oh, it died of cardiovascular collapse. So it's like the answer for everything. So if you have a dead animal and you can't decide why they died, you just say, oh, they died from cardiovascular collapse, because you can't be wrong, right? I mean, it's always going to be right. So that's what I say. But it's a little bit of a cop-out in the veterinary world. So that's what an axiom is. So then we're going to go to, oh my goodness. Oh, okay, this is the outline of my different axioms we're going to talk about. This is kind of almost like, it's a nice thing in the Army, because in the Army you really do have like chapters. It's really easy to divide your life into chapters because you have this assignment, you have the next assignment, you have the next assignment. And so, I was really looking for the Lord. I thought I was going to go into foreign missions, and so that's what I thought my chapter was going to be, one big book in foreign missions. But in truth, the Lord kind of led me to the military, to where that's where I served. So, my first story, the life preserver axiom. So when I was fixing to go, in the point where I was applying for vet school, but I was in undergraduate, I went to work at a youth camp, and spent the whole summer working at this youth camp. And in the youth camp, it was all boys, and it was at a horse farm. Now I applied to do this youth camp, this job. It was a summer missionary. I applied to be a summer missionary thinking, oh, I'm going to go to Colorado, or I'm going to go to Montana, because what I kind of did in college is I would work for my dad all summer, roofing houses, doing construction, and I would buy horses. And then as the year went along, as I ran out of money, I would sell these horses. I would train and sell horses, and that was kind of my bank account in college, was training and selling horses. And so I'm like, oh, I want to go to Montana, I want to go to Colorado, I'm going to go to somewhere out west. And they're like, hey, we really need you to go to Edmond, Oklahoma. Okay, Edmond, Oklahoma, I'm already in Oklahoma. I don't need to go to Oklahoma. But they're like, no, we really think you should go to Edmond, Oklahoma, because we have this boys ranch, and they could really use somebody who's good with horses, and you can train horses, and you can train kids to work with the horses. And so I'm like, I don't know if I want to go to Edmond, but I'm like, okay, the Lord must be calling me to Edmond. So I go to Edmond, Oklahoma for the summer. The boys ranch town that's in Edmond, it's a Baptist boys ranch town, and they have the main ranch, and then they have this farm. And the farm is about 20 miles away, and so I'm driving kids out there to the farm one day, and I come over the top of this hill. There was some flooding. I come over the top of the hill, and there's tracks coming out of the water. So I'm thinking, okay, it's okay. There was tracks coming out of the water. Okay, I'm 19 at the time, okay? My brain was not fully developed. I used that as a complete excuse. And so I see tracks coming out of the water, so I'm like, well, it must be okay. I'm not kidding you. There's water for more than a quarter of a mile ahead of me, right? And I'm thinking, wow, somebody else came out of that water. It must be okay. So I drive into the water. And I think I'm not really making very good progress. And then I start hearing this boom, 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 because the water is like running all the way up into the exhaust of the car, and then like blowing out every once in a while. I finally the engine dies, but I'm still moving. I thought, well, I was I thought I was driving this thing, but no, I'm literally floating downstream in a van with 12 children in the van. And we're floating down the stream, and at one point the van, because the engine's heavier, so the van starts shifting sideways. And one of the kids said, "Everybody get on this side." And so they got on the one side and they balanced the van out. We float away. We float on down the road. We managed to stay on the road. Eventually I jump out the window and I kind of balance the van and it comes to rest on a higher place on the road. Right next to me is like an oil storage derrick. So in Oklahoma, they have these oil tanks and they'll build these like dikes around the outside of them. So I'm taking the kids and swimming them one at a time over from the van over to this oil storage area because it's protected. And I basically have to go through this like bar ditch. So I'm literally have to like throw them across the bar ditch, then swim next to them. So get all the kids out and next to the, out of the van, into the oil storage, into the dike. We managed to find a hole under the fence. Just as an aside, one of the biggest advantages for this whole story is that my brothers both went to OU. And so to mock me every year, my brothers would buy me OU gear, right? And so when all this happens, I'm actually wearing an OU shirt. And right as I get the last kid out, I'm like, I don't know, nobody's dead. This must be a good plan, I guess, And the Five Alive News helicopter flies over. And the helicopter lands inside the old storage tank area. We find a way under the fence, and the kids all get a helicopter ride. I mean, I'm like a superhero to these kids, right? I even have like the footage still from the news. That's what the pictures are there, is the van that was kind of buried in the water. And the kids was like, we were all screaming. We thought we're going to die, but Mr. Estep said, if we just pray, we're going to be okay. And we were okay. So it was a really good, witness to the children, I guess. So I'm bringing them to the Lord the hard way. So get all the kids out of the van, get them all on the helicopter. They all get a helicopter ride. I get back to the boys' ranch town. I'm like, they're going to fire me for sure. And turns out this was the worst van they owned, and I totaled it for them. And so they were like, hey, insurance is going to buy us a new van. This is great. So I was like somehow a hero. Even that night on the news, like on the Five Alive News, they say this like missionary saved these children from the floodwaters. Never mentioned that the missionary drove the kids into the floodwaters. But it happens, right? So, axiom number one is the life preserver axiom, which sometimes you got to convince someone they're drowning before they'll receive the life preserver. And so that's what I did with the kids. I went an extra step to convince them that they're drowning. And I wish I could read the scripture this way, but it's too far away, so I'm not going to be able to read the scripture with it. But each of these kind of have a scriptural reference that support the axiom. But that's the life preserver axiom and was an important chapter of my life. Believe it or not, at the end of the summer, they tried to give me a job to make me stay there, even though I also had another truck that rolled in the pond that was probably my fault too. But, me and water, I was close with the water, So it was after this that I actually went to Falls Creek. And the preacher's sermon was literally that you have to convince people they're drowning before they'll even catch the life preserver. And I was like, does he know something about me? But anyway, it was good times. So then we go to the J-Lube axiom. So I'm in vet school. I was gonna be a cow doctor. That was my entire plan in life, was to be a cow doctor. So everything I did, in vet school you get to do some of your rotations you get to pick. So I always did the cow rotations so I could be a cow doctor. And when I went out to the clinics and I did clinic stuff, I always went to cow clinics. And so I was my entire life, and that is actually me, and that's literally 6 months before I was a veterinarian. So we'll get to that part later because I looked 16 when I graduated vet school. I thought it was the coolest thing ever that I got accepted to vet school at 20 and I was a doctor at 24. But there's problems with that because who respects a 24-year-old? Nobody. So anyway, we'll get to that. So the J-Lube axiom. So I'm in vet school, and I'm over in small animal medicine rotation. And they come over to the small animal rotation and they say, hey, there's a problem. There's actually a resident, somebody who's like training to be a food animal veterinarian, but she had this calf that she couldn't pull. And so she said there was no other staff there to help them. And so she said, hey, could somebody go get Estep? And so they come over to small animal medicine. They get me out of small animal medicine, and I go over to the food animal clinic. And there's this cow, and there's a foot sticking out. And so, well, cows actually, when they're trying to have a baby, the babies can get kind of dried out. And so they get really sticky, right? They're not slick. And so the first thing I do is to say, well, give me some J-Lube. It's actually this like powdered lubricant. We mix it all up, and it's the slickest stuff you've ever seen in your life. And so I said, bring me some J-Lube. And so we make a bucket of the J-Lube. I pump the cow full of the J-Lube, and then the calf starts trying to come out. Well, I don't want to make the resident look bad. I mean, I'm just a student, so you definitely don't want to make people look bad. And so I'm literally holding the calf in while I actually put the chains on the calf and, get the whole calf puller and all of that stuff hooked up. So I'm, trying to not make the resident look bad. And then we get the chains on him, and I act like it's really hard, and then the calf comes right out. The calf is fine. The resident maintains their pride, and I'm still considered the Lord of food animal medicine. But so so this is the J-Lube axiom, which is it just takes sometimes you need some more lubrication. And to me, one of the things that really made me survive in vet school is that I never really said vet school was more important than my following of the Lord. And so I stayed in the scripture, I led a Bible study, I did things that kept me close to the Lord, and it made vet school a lot better. Brian Smith that's out here, he did a pathology residency just like I did in the Army, and everybody who does in the pathology residency becomes a runner because you have to do something or your brain melts down. So in vet school, the way I kept my brain from melting down, other than the fact that I trained horses and I did construction and I did everything because I was poor, I also stayed in the Word. And to me, the Word of the Lord is going to get you out of all of those sticky situations. So I'm graduating from vet school. It's time to apply for a job. And I go up and I'm looking because I'm going to be a foreign missionary. That's the point. I'm going to be a foreign missionary. And the Baptist seminary, there's a Baptist seminary in Kansas City that really specializes in foreign missionaries. So that's where I'm going to go to my next school. It's going to be to the seminary in Kansas City. But I need to get a job where I can still do some, what I want to do is mixed animal, mostly like cows and goats and sheep and stuff, so that I can be, when I go to foreign missions, I don't want to be a new graduate. I want to be somebody who's experienced. So I'm trying to find a job in Kansas City that is going to give me a good background in food animal medicine. And so I go up, interview with this guy. He's like, I really like you, but it'd be great if you could come back for spring break. If you'll work for me for the week of spring break, then I will, be kind of a long interview, but I could use the help. And so while I'm there, he has me spay a cat. And so I'm spaying the cat, and I go in, everything goes fine, but right as I'm finishing, the cat starts waking back up from the anesthesia. And so he redoses the cat. I finish the spay, then we go out on a call, and I'm doing some pregnancy checking cows and doing some other stuff with him, and it all goes really well. But then we come back to the clinic, and the cat is mostly dead. And I'm like, this is really a bad thing to do on a job interview, to kill your surgery patient. And so I'm like, I don't know, we're trying to do everything, trying to fix the cat. Cat dies. He says, well, I'm going to go call the owner, and I want you to go ahead and do a necropsy. Maybe that's what I was destined to do, is necropsies. But I'm going to do a necropsy. You start doing a necropsy, and we're going to figure out maybe something was wrong. So I go in there, and both of the ligatures were tied in the cat. Everything was fine, but the cat's abdomen was full of blood, and the cat had bled to death. The veterinarian was convinced the cat had probably eaten a mouse with rat poison, or the cat had clotting problems or something like that. So he didn't really hold it against me. But I'm like, call my wife. I'm like, well, I don't know. This seems like maybe it's not going to work. At the same time was whenever George Bush and Bill Clinton were, the presidential election. And I also realized at the same time that he was a Democrat. And so that was questionable. No, it wasn't that big of a deal. But he also was, his wife had divorced him, and he's living above the clinic by himself. And I'm like, maybe this isn't the life I want. But it was the only job I could find anywhere in the Kansas City area. And so, but it's not looking good. And so this is the roadkill axiom, because sometimes it's bad to be the cat that's in the way of somebody following the Lord. The Lord had a different plan for me. And I was just determined, I'm supposed to serve people. This is what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to be a foreign missionary because the Lord told me. I mean, in a voice, the Lord said, you will spend your life serving people. And so that's what I did. That's what I thought I was doing. But this poor cat got in the way. So the roadkill axiom is don't get in the Lord's way when he's got a different plan. Sometimes our interpretation of what the Lord wants to do for us is not what the Lord wants to do with us. And we need to be open to what the Lord's plan is. So then we have which one is that? The Jobin axiom. So that night, I call my wife. I say, man, I think this is a bad idea. Maybe this isn't going to work out. And she says, well, I just got a call from our friends out in Dodge City, Kansas, because their associate just quit today, and they called to say if you had a job yet, because they think you'd be perfect out there. So I drive from Kansas City to Stillwater to Dodge City, Kansas, and pick up my wife in Stillwater. We go to Dodge City, and I interview for this job. Everything that I needed to hear. And this is what the Lord will do to you sometimes. He'll lead you down. If you're not following him completely, maybe he says, hey, I can tempt him this way. And so I go out there and I interview, and the owner of the clinic says, oh, I have this other clinic, and all the profits go to foreign missions. And all the things that he said, and I'm like, oh, this is going to be a mentor to me. And he's like, I'm going to teach you to be a food animal or a feedlot veterinarian. I'm going to do all of these things. So we end up accepting a job and moving out to Western Kansas to be a feedlot veterinarian. So if you see in the picture there, I know it's a little bit hard to see, but there's all of those kind of brown areas, and then there's a little in the bottom right corner, or left corner, sorry, left and right's a challenge for me. But in the bottom left corner, that's where my mobile home was that I lived in the thing. And it smelled like feedlot day and night. And out in Western Kansas, they call that the smell of money. It didn't smell like money. But so I go out there and I'm working, and it was a great experience. And I've never had a bad job. I had such a good time out there. The people were awesome. The work was a lot, 80 to 100 hours every week. And it was, my boss didn't take call, but he also didn't charge for people to call after hours. And so I would work all day, and then at the end of the day, I would go home and I would take a shower and I would sit down to eat dinner with my wife, and then we'd get a phone call because the farmer who worked all day would come home and his cow was having a baby. And so I would go deliver that baby. And that would take me till like 8:30. And then 8:30 would come, and I get back to the house and I'm eating the warmed up food, and the phone rings. Well, there was the first farmer who came home, but he tried to pull the baby himself. And so then he gives up about 8:30. And so then I go and pull that baby or do a C-section. And then there's the farmer who saw the cow but said, I'm going to go eat dinner, and then maybe watch the news, and then so he's calling at 10:30, and this goes until like 2 in the morning, pretty much every night of the week for a year. It was good times. I really did have a great time doing it, believe it or not. But it was a tough life. So I'll tell you a great story. So I go out to this farm, and so I would work most of the time at regular clinic, but every other weekend I would go, every third weekend I would run this other clinic in this other town. I'd go there, and I'd get out of the car, and as I said, I looked 16. And so it happened more than once. These farmers, they would show up with their cow, and they would say, well, I need to see the vet. And I'm like, well, I'm the vet, and they're like, no, like the veterinarian, because a lot of times in like feedlot medicine, the people who's like the nurse or the vet tech, they kind of call them the vet. And I'm like, oh, no, I need to see, they say I need to see the veterinarian. And I'm like, I'm the veterinarian. I'm serious to you. I actually carried my diploma in my truck, okay? Because people would not believe me. I thought it was really cool that I was like a baby and I was a veterinarian. But those guys that were like schlubs who like had their masters in math and then didn't start vet school till they were 40, the day they graduated, people thought they had 20 years of experience. So anyway, so I get out of the truck. This guy is huge. I mean, he's huge. And I'm like, wow, you're a big old guy. And he's like, yeah, I played football. I was like center for the 49ers for like 12 years or something. So he was a big guy. and he's like, who the hell are you? And I'm like, I'm the veterinarian. I'm going to take care of your cow. And he's like, oh, that's all of it. Always sending these children out here to kill my cows. And so I'm like, oh man, this is going to be a tough one. And so his cow had what's called a uterine prolapse. So after they have a baby, sometimes they prolapse their uterus. And so we do this crazy thing where we take a trash bag and a bag of sugar, and you actually like massage it, and it takes all the fluid out of it, and you can push it all back in, and you suture them back up. Well, I'm suturing the cow back up and everything, and he's like, oh, she's just going to push that back out. And I'm like, no, this is how we do it. Oh, no, she's just going to push it back out. I know look at her. She's still straight and she can push it out. So one of my problems, and this is what my dad used to tell me in construction, because I grew up, I'm like, well, why don't we do it this way? Why don't we do it this way? And he says, Scott, you think too much. And so I was always thinking a little too much. And so I'm thinking, there's this other drug. Instead of lidocaine epidural, we could give her epidural with xylazine, or Rompin, we call it. And it's more of an anesthetic type thing, but cows are super sensitive to it. And I'm thinking about this. I'm smart. I'm not completely retarded, just mostly. But so I am going to give this cow, if you give a horse an epidural with this Rompin, there actually it like numbs their perineal area. If you're doing like breeding things with the horse for like over a 3-day period, you can use this instead of lidocaine that lasts for like 3 days. And I'm like, I could do this on the cow, and this will help. And so I take and I put a little bit of Rompin, because I know cows are sensitive to it, a little bit of Rompin and some lidocaine. I put it in the syringe and I do the epidural on the cow, and I'm injecting it, and I swear to you, my hand is still standing over the cow with the syringe, and the cow drops dead in the chute. Like off the needle. She just literally falls off the needle, and he starts screaming. And so this is kind of like a Jack and the Beanstalk type of thing where I think I'm probably going to die, right? And so we kick the cow out of the side of the thing, and I'm pumping on the side of the cow, trying to resuscitate the cow. He's screaming, you killed my cow. And I'm like, oh, this is bad. And so I'm literally mouth to snout resuscitation. I guarantee you, I was resuscitating this cow, blowing on her big old snout. And then I realized, oh yeah, there's a drug you can give to reverse Rompin. And so he has like 8-foot fences, but this is a near-death experience. So I easily run and like spring over the fence, and I jump over, I'm running to my truck to get this reversal agent. He thinks I'm escaping, which would be a wise decision. It would be a totally legitimate thing to do to escape at this point. You better get back here, you killed my cow. And so then I get the reversal agent, jump back over the fence, put it in the cow. I continued mouth to snout resuscitation and pumping on the cow's chest. And after like 3 minutes, what seemed like an hour, the cow started breathing again. And I undeaded the cow. So that was tough, right? But it saved my life, yes. And let me just tell you, if you kill somebody's cow and bring it back to life, they don't worry about them straining about their uterine prolapse anymore. So he didn't even mention that again. So in a way, it worked. So, okay. So this guy, he was huge, right? So what does this one say? So this is the Jobine axiom, and it says, thank the Lord for reversal agents and for second chances. Because what happened while I was at this place, I thought that, I have lived my life for the Lord. I'm trying to do the things, because this guy, one of the things he told me is, you work for me a year, then I will pay for you to go to seminary. You can go to seminary part-time. Everything I needed to hear is what this guy told me. But then I go there, and turns out, he wants me to do, he gets on to me for doing C-sections on the side of cows, because then when you sell them, people can see there's a scar, which to me, that's honest, right? And if a bull didn't quite check right on its semen test, he would say, oh, no, let's test him again, and he would make me do things that I thought were dishonest. And so that kind of said, okay, just because he says he's a man of God and he says he donates stuff, turns out this other clinic hadn't made money for 3 years, so there were no profits going to foreign missions and things. And so we put our faith in men, and I realized that's not great. In almost 36 years, as of in about 3 weeks, me and my wife have been married 36 years, there was a neighbor who really tried to pursue and to get my wife to kind of have an affair. And he was another veterinarian. The veterinarian that called and asked us to come out there, he tried to seduce my wife. And so this marriage that I thought was impervious, you realize, no, that's not so strong either. And in the church at the time, like as soon as we got there, the pastor left. And so the church was kind of dead. It wasn't much. And so just one at a time, the Lord just knocked all of these things. I almost died 3 times. I did end up having to have like hand reconstruction and everything from cows beating me up and having my hand destroyed. It was actually the day after Clinton won the election. I declared it a day of mourning, and I wore all black. And a cow ended up smashing the end of my finger off. And so I was like the Lord telling me, don't be acting like that. So anyway, one at a time, all of these things around me showed me that my faith in all of these things were not in the Lord. They were in man and in just, my marriage will be perfect because it is, and all of these things. And so that was the Jobine axiom. Thank you, Lord, for second chances. So then I call a friend and I say, what do you think about the Army? So a good buddy of mine had joined the Army right out of vet school, and I said, what do you think about the Army? He's like, well, it's not James Herriot. So how many of you have, if you've ever read the All Creatures Great and Small, and have the TV shows and everything, it's not James Herriot to be in the Army. But if it's more important to you to be a father than it is to be a veterinarian, the Army is much more conducive to fatherhood than 80 to 90 hours, 80 to 100 hours a week in feedlot practice. And so I decide that sounds like a good idea. So I joined the Army. So now we have the fishhook axiom. So I go to Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, which, most people, if you did basic training in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, you think it's the worst place on the planet. But if you're permanent party, it's got fishing, it's got hunting. I had a place for my horses. It's actually a pretty nice place to be. So it's a good place to be permanent party. That's actually where I bought my first set of golf clubs. I thought, I'm an officer in the Army. I need to learn how to play golf. You can ask many guys here. I didn't, but still, I tried. and so I'm there in the Army. I have this guy brings his dog in one day. And the dog is, I don't know who the guy is. And honestly, when I was going to join the Army, I had this guy call me. He was a full colonel. I I don't know what a colonel is. I don't, it still doesn't really matter to me that much whether colonels or generals or any of those things. But he's like, so if you get selected, are you going to join the Army? I said, I don't know. You're going to send me where I want to go? So I didn't know how I was supposed to talk to these people. But so this guy happened to be the command sergeant major of the base. But I didn't know this. This is what might happen. But he comes in. And so he says, I have this dog. I've taken him to 3 veterinarians, and they said, that guy out at the base is crazy, so maybe he can help you. And so I was always willing to do whatever I had to do to make things work. And so he had this dog, and the dog had a fish hook all the way at the base of the heart. And so they're like, it's going to take like open chest surgery and all of these things. There's no way that you can get this hook out. And so I go in, and I'm like, well, I have all of these big, long uterine forceps. I might be able to make a decision in the neck and get all the way in there and get that hook out. And sure enough, I do. After 3 veterinarians said you couldn't do it, I did it. And that was kind of how I did surgery. I was always kind of willing to do whatever it took. And so they're thinking we're going to have to cut into the chest. They'd even called the veterinary school and sent them the radiographs, and they said, oh, that's bad. We probably can't fix it. And so he brings it to me just to see what I could do. And I'm like, well, think about it. My dad always said I think too much, so maybe this will work. So it almost got me killed at the last place. But I'm able to reach in there. So actually my first award in the Army was an Army Achievement Medal from the Command Sergeant Major of the base for pulling this fish hook out of the dog's chest. But so also we got really involved in this local church. And this church was a great little church. The picture on the left is not the actual building, but it's close. The one on the right is the current building. And this church was a great church. We were right next door. The pastor and his wife, we went over there to use the telephone. She answers the door, and she's like 6 months pregnant, and my wife is also 6 months pregnant. I left that piece out. Basically, the biggest thing that made me want to join the Army was my wife became pregnant. And I said, I don't see that I can be a very good dad working 100 hours a week and being on calls all the time, so I'm going to join the Army. It's a pretty rough life if you think the Army, okay, is going to be better than what should be a white-collar job, right? But they say veterinarians are the most educated blue-collar workers on the planet because we do a lot of physical labor. So anyway, these people became our best friends, the preacher and his wife. We really had a great relationship with them. Well, this church was a great little church, but this church had no vision at all for the community. They just really wanted to serve the church, and they felt like bringing in too many people might mess this place up. And they had almost $100,000 in the bank, but hadn't given the preacher a raise in 8 years, since he'd come there as a young pastor. He's working at this school as a janitor so that he can be there as a preacher. And he was a great preacher, and the people loved him, and he was just a good man. And so I went to the head of the deacons and said, what's up with this? You really need to give this guy a raise. And so we went through the whole process. They decide, yes, we're going to give him a raise. I'm like, well, you not only need to give him a raise, you need to every year have a conversation about whether you need to give him another raise in the future. You can't just let it be this way 8 years from now. And so they did. Well, this crazy thing happens. The deacons are so worried that since they gave him this raise, that the church is going to run out of money. And so then all of the deacons were having a vacation Bible school. And they're like, this is a great opportunity for us to really maybe grow the church a little bit so we can pay for this raise. And so the deacons all come, they get involved. We have 200 kids come to the vacation Bible school that year. In 3 years, they tore down the old building and built a place that was 5 times the size because the church grew and learned to serve the community. And so I just really felt like this is when I first realized that the Lord doesn't send you places on accidents. He doesn't give you jobs on accidents. He doesn't make you part of MGA as an accident. He doesn't do anything on accident. This is your mission. And so I really felt like the Lord really gave us this opportunity there. And then 20 months later, he sent us to the next place. So then we go to Germany. And so we have the ventilation axiom. So when I'm in Germany, great job, great clinics. I actually ran 5 veterinary clinics. I had 3 German vets that worked for me, had a big staff. This weird thing happened because I had prior service, prior clinical practice. When I went into my first job, they're like, well, it's really a major job, but because you've had clinical service, we think you can do it since you have clinical experience. And then when I go to Germany, well, this is really a major job, but because you've had all of these people at the last job, we think you can do it. And so I have 35 people and 5 clinics and all of these things. In our church there, we get involved with this group of people who are actually doing missions in Azerbaijan. And so my wife was adopted. I was half adopted. My stepdad adopted me. My name used to be Power, changed it to Estep. Anyway, so I'm talking to him. I'm like, we would really like to do an adoption. So we'd like to go to, is there adoptions in Azerbaijan? He's like, I don't know if there's adoptions in Azerbaijan, but I'm wanting to start this sheep herding project. We want to give these people money so they can do this sheep herding project. So we need a veterinarian to go to Azerbaijan to tell us what we need to do to start this sheep herding project. So I go there and I go and visit this farm, and it was quite the experience. Basically, I learned that animals in the United States have twins and triplets because it's not so hot. So in Azerbaijan, it's too hot here for twins. You might know that's genetics. And the things, the Russians, when they were in charge, they didn't say, if you graze the animals in the bar ditches, they'll get liver flukes. They said, if you graze the animals in the bar ditches, we'll kill you. And so as soon as the Germans were gone, or the Russians were gone, they grazed the animals in the bar ditches, and all their animals had liver flukes, and their animals all died. And so they didn't really explain things to them. So it was a good experience. I went there. I saw that. I also went into, because we were trying to adopt a child, and so I went to this orphanage. And let me just tell you a bad idea. Going to an orphanage that has 100 babies, and none of them are crying. It'll mess you up. And so I get all the way through the process of adopting a child from Azerbaijan, and the U.S. government wouldn't give me a visa because they said, well, you've used the old Russian system, and Azerbaijan doesn't have a system. So I went through the Azerbaijan system, worked with them, actually went to the Milli Mejlis, met with senators and things, and they actually, right about the time we left Germany, they opened up where Americans could adopt children from Azerbaijan, and they still to this day can adopt children from there. But better than that, because the death rate in the orphanages in Azerbaijan was 50%. And even while I was there was a little baby that was half black. And they were upset because this baby was fat and healthy, and they said to me, this baby is trash. Could you take her? She just won't die. They were upset, and I wanted to take her. I would take her right then, but wasn't able to. The U.S. wouldn't let me have her, so applied for the government to change the laws, and managed to get at least the laws changed. But better than that, the government said if these Americans are going to be going into our orphanages, they're going to see the conditions. So we need to put some people to look into these orphanages and see what's going on. So within about 6 months of when I was there, they completely redid all the orphanages, and all the babies quit dying. So whether I adopted the babies or not, I was a part of it. And my life, I haven't done great things, but I've been part of a lot of great things, and that's pretty exciting. So we're also part of this ministry in Germany. And in each of these chapters of my life, there's like where God is using me at work, but there's also where God is using me in ministry. And so the preacher of this church, he was a good man, but he had been like a local missionary kind of in a U.S. church, and in his 60s, 70s, goes over to Germany, and we would buy them groceries, and they're like, no, we're just going to give you a list, and you can buy the groceries, and we'll pay you back. I'm like, no, that's against the Status of Forces Agreement. That's against the law. We can't do that. And so they would have other people. They quit giving us their lists. And they went to other people, and I'm like, look, you're going to get these people in trouble. That's against the law. Well, then he has these people buy a TV for him at the PX, and he sets the TV on the couch, And he's getting up and he leans against the couch and the TV falls off and breaks the TV. And so then he says, well, the people said, well, we bought that with our Visa, so we can actually use our insurance with the Visa. And I'm like, no. And so we had to leave the church, which was a hard thing. And actually, the church collapsed after we left. And so, hard things. But another thing that happened while I was there, I had all these different clinics I was in charge of. And one time the commander had to go because the contractor shows up at the facility. We're rebuilding the facility. So everywhere I worked in the military, we managed to rebuild the facilities. I think this background in construction was good for me in the military. And so the contractor shows up and I'm not there. And so the commander has to come over. And the commander, he has to answer questions. And one of the questions is, should we put a ventilation fan in the wall from the kennels to the outside? And he wasn't sure what the answer on that was. And so then when I get back, he's like going to dress me down for not being there to answer these questions. I had the documentation showing that I had told the contractors, you need to tell me when you're coming. I can, these things. But some challenges. Me and that commander didn't get along the best just because I was really never a very good soldier. I was good at getting things done, but I wasn't very good at doing the military stuff. And so me and him didn't get along great, but he was really concerned that I wasn't there to answer the ventilation question for him. And the really annoying thing was that he didn't ask me. He said to this first sergeant to find out how often I'm going to these other clinics. And the first sergeant called my receptionist, who talked to my NCOIC, who called the other town's clinic, the NCOIC receptionist, who talked to their NCOIC. I'm like, sir, that's not how officers work together. And so he and I we had some struggles. But it all worked out in the end. So this is the ventilation axiom, which is, oh my goodness. Yeah, so ventilation fans are necessary in dog kennels as well as in third world orphanages and in corrupt ministries. So sometimes life is a little harder and we gotta do some hard things, but there was no doubt that's what the Lord had planned for me. We moved into another ministry and were really able to be involved, and the Lord really blessed it, and still have some good friends from that ministry. So then the Lord moves me to Washington, D.C. to do a pathology residency. I got to do some cool stuff there. Sing Sing and Ling Ling, the two pandas that the Emperor of China gave to Nixon back in the 60s, 70s. When Sing Sing died, I did the necropsy on him. That was pretty cool. I did like a full-size elephant one day, and elephants, you can literally stand inside the chest cavity. And I'm in there and I'm cutting, and all of a sudden I hit this something, and this like abscess like ruptures, and this stuff comes all over me. I'm like, oh, this is there's like an abscess here. And they're like, oh, maybe we should all be wearing masks because elephants have tuberculosis a lot of times. And so I got to take a TB test for the next 2 years straight. That was fun. But never had TB. But one time in the middle of the night, I'm like leaving the facility. It's like not the middle of the night, it's like 5 o'clock and I'm leaving. And these people open the door and I'm like, what do we want to do with this? And I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, well, we have this gorilla we just euthanized. And so I call the pathologist. I'm like, what do you want to do? He's like, yeah, we need to do it today. Go ahead and get started. And so I'm in this building at the National Zoo. So this is the National Zoo. I'm at the National Zoo. This building is scary, okay? It's like away from everything else, and it's dark, and I swear it's haunted or something because all these spirits of dead animals. I don't know. But it was a scary place, and I'm doing this gorilla in there by myself in the middle of by the time it's like 6:30. Finally, the pathologist shows up and says, and I'm like taking the brain out. I'm almost finished because I never have been a slow person on those sorts of things. So yeah, good times. I really had a great time in the residency. I've got a lot of great experiences, and also was really involved in our church. And in that church, you can see up on the top row, about 2/3 on the left, that's me without hippie hair and much younger. So I was actually in a gospel choir and sang tenor in the gospel choir. Had a great ministry there. We're really involved with raising my kids because So one child was born in Maryland, one child was born in Germany, the third child was born in first was born in Missouri, Germany, Maryland. So we had a kid for assignment for the first three. And so on the left here, you can see the far left is my son, who's actually sitting back there in the back. He's much larger than this now. And then my two daughters, and there's three of our very close friends there in the picture as well. So that's one of my favorite pictures. And so Maryland, doing the residency was really exciting, had a great time. But then I also learned an important thing, which is the snowman axiom. This is probably one of the greatest lessons I learned as a parent, because in Maryland, we'd have a lot of snowstorms. Now, sometimes you get pretty sick of the snowstorms because then there's another snowstorm and another snowstorm, and you're having to shovel snow all the time. So it's not so exciting to shovel the snow. But a lot of times we get a nice little snowstorm, and I would say, we'll build a snowman tomorrow or the day after that. And then the sun would come out and the snow would go away. And the kids are like, oh, we didn't get to build a snowman. And then next time it snows, I'm busy. I mean, pathology residency is pretty intense. It's a lot of work to do residency. And so I'm studying, and I was actually part of this thing called the Wednesday Slide Conference, where we had this international slide conference. And so I was in charge for it. And I found my children's little fingers were really good at putting slides in these little boxes to mail off to people. So I put the kids all to work. It was like China and iPhones. And so we had I tried to make it as family friendly as possible, but it was a pretty intense time. But I realized an important thing, because a lot of that snow went away and I didn't build a snowman. And so what I realized from this is that there's really a finite number of opportunities you get to build a snowman with your children. Now, you can apply this to anything, whether it's going to baseball games or being involved with them in their school activities or their church activities or Pinewood Derby or any of those things. There's a finite number, and the number of snowmen you build is your choice. So as a father, you got to make those opportunities of high priority, because it's predetermined when you're born how many chances you're going to have to build a snowman, but you get to pick how many you build. So that was the snowman axiom. That was the big thing we got out of Maryland, along with a lot of great friends and a lot of great opportunities. So then we have the rhino axiom. So sorry, there's a little bit of blood in this picture, but I have been very fortunate here in San Antonio. I've done actually probably 7 rhino autopsies and I don't know how many giraffes and those sorts of things. San Antonio is a great place for lots of opportunities. So this particular rhino that's in this picture, they'd euthanized the rhino because the rhino had kidney disease. And we're all involved, and it's like logistically, what you can't see is right behind it there's a forklift actually being able to help lift the leg off of it because they're so heavy and stuff. And so we're trying to do this rhino autopsy, and it's very intense, and there's probably 20 people, and I have another pathologist there helping me. And the whole reason they euthanized it was because it had kidney disease. So we're going through the whole thing, and then I get to the end, and I look, and I'm realizing that I never even saw the kidney. I can't even remember what the kidneys look like. And so I'm like, well, shoot, that's why they euthanized it. I probably should look at it. Now, I got to see it on the microscope, but I didn't really get to see it in person. So same time, we really got involved in student ministry. In student ministry, it was awesome. We had a great student ministry. My son kind of grew up in that ministry. We'd have events, and we'd have 200 kids there, and we'd have a band, and we'd have outside speakers, and we'd have kids getting excited for the Lord, and it was awesome. But sometimes in the logistics of it all, you forget that the thing is about the children, just like the kidneys. And so that's the rhino axiom, which is that you just don't want to get too distracted on the details that you forget the purpose. Okay, and kind of wrapping it up, I'm not really flying in this picture. So I did, since I've retired, so we have the retirement axiom, and so I have gotten distracted. Part of the reason I'm not a better ball golfer is that I really am trying to win the world championship in disc golf. So I was in 7th this year. I have won the U.S. Masters, So I'm not bad, but I'm not the champion yet. So I'm trying to get there. But this picture was from when I won the U.S. championship. But I also have started, since I retired from the Army, I do autopsies for like the Austin Zoo and all these exotic places. I actually have 2 veterinary surgery residents with me right now training for the next 2 weeks. And we did a kudu and a sheep and a dog and a cat today. So it's a little bit of something all the time. And so now I'm kind of in this, I'm not doing retirement very well. I kind of suck at retirement. I'm thinking maybe the second retirement I'll get better. I'm hoping. So, so the retirement axiom, so this is a bristlecone pine. And you can see this same tree, okay, is 6,000 years old, which is kind of the length of humanity, or the length of kind of since we've been writing words and doing things in an organized way. And so in this same tree's lifetime, there's kind of the beginning of words, and there's, you know, all of the growth of Rome, and there's Christ, and there's all of the things. And so the kind of important thing is in retirement is that the whole race matters. Okay, you don't get to take a time off at the end. And y'all are a little older maybe than I am, some of you, not all of you, but your race isn't finished yet. Okay? And what I've learned from all of this walk, okay, is that sure, ministry is ministry, but work is also ministry. Play is also ministry. These are all places where the Lord has put us where we can influence people for Him. That's what we're here for. And so even if you're in this wonky thing and you're stuck in the doctor's office and the doctor's behind and you're there for like 3 hours when you should have been there for 15, it could be because you're supposed to speak to someone there. You're supposed to help someone there. And so it's a long fight. And I want to read, I'm going to come off the stage. It's going to mess up the camera because I got to read this one thing. Because this to me is the best statement for retirement. And I was actually at a disc golf tournament last week, and a guy actually spoke this over me, which is Psalms 92, 12 through 15. The righteous will flourish like a palm tree. They will grow like the cedar of Lebanon. Planted in the house of the Lord, they will flourish in the courts of the Lord, and they shall bear fruit in old age. I'm going to say that again. They will bear fruit in old age. And they will stay fresh and green, proclaiming, the Lord is upright. He is my rock, and there is no wickedness in Him. That's the retirement axiom. So, sorry, this is a little gross picture, but I think this is like the coolest picture. This is actually the heart of a horse. And I think it's just such a beautiful picture because it's actually nice and heart-shaped, and you see the green grass behind it. And it's one of my favorite pictures. My daughter used to go with me. This is how my poor children. My son's actual first memory in life is going with me to do a necropsy on a horse. And so he remembers this gray horse when he was like, I don't know, 2. And so he may be scarred. But now he works for me. I have a crematorium business now, and so death is not a problem for him now. But anyway, so my daughter used to go with me, and she took this picture, and I love this picture of this horse's heart. But then on the inside of this horse's heart, there's all of this stuff. This horse had a bacterial infection on the valves of the heart. It has actually made the horse lame and had all these problems. And so, because it's really what's on the inside that matters. So, that's my story. Thank you for listening. I appreciate you all. I will, if anybody has any questions, if you want to know how to throw a Frisbee on hyzer or what to do with your crazy dog, I'm happy to take any questions.
Anybody got a question? We got just a couple minutes. How to take care of your pet at the end of life? How to throw a Frisbee the right direction?
Scott, I have a dog, and I love my dog. His name's Cowboy. And we've been feeding him, he's 6 years old. We've been feeding him kibble. And then my wife started making like turkey meatloaf and stuff like that. What would you recommend? How do you feed your dog that you love to extend their life?
Well, that's actually a good question. We humanize dogs and think that they need the variety that we need as humans. The really important thing is to feed them a quality thing and feed them the same thing for the rest of their life. You don't need to buy, chicken this week and beef the next week and deer the next week. You just need to buy quality food and feed them the same thing, and don't be afraid of that. They're going to get. They need variety. We need variety as humans. Dogs don't care that much. Everyone who's ever come to me and said my dog won't eat always has a fat dog. So it's hard to tell them that. What do you say? All right, is that it?
All right, Scott, tell me, how many discs do you have in your bag when you're competing and you're serious in a competition?
So I am what they call a mold minimalist. So they talk about molds, the different kinds of disc are molds. And I'm a mold minimalist, and I carry 11.
Okay.
But 3 of them are the exact same putter, 3 of them are the exact same driver, 2 of them are the same. So really, I've only carried 4 discs. And I'll tell you a story, the best round I ever shot in my life, I was at a tournament and doing poorly, and I was actually injured. And so I said, it must be the bag, must be the problem. And so I played with 4 Frisbees, and I beat everybody with 4 Frisbees. So, yeah, you should only play with a 5-iron, is the truth.
There you go. All right. Scott, thank you so much for being with us tonight. Thanks for what a witness and a testimony for us. Come on down.